Welcome to the GSD with Jenny podcast, where we talk about how to overcome all the stuff that gets in the way of getting shit done. Imposter syndrome, fear, money, relationships, networking, building businesses. We're going to talk to experts, or as I say, mavens, that provide practical and tactical advice on how to GSD. I'm your host, Jenny Buchholz, founder and CEO of Haven Creative. Now, I started my business with $300 in a laptop and grew it to a team of Haven mavens serving clients around the world and generating over 7 figures in revenue. We were named one of the fastest growing companies in Charlotte and 2024 Crowns of Enterprise Woman-Owned Business of the Year, and I'm incredibly proud of the success we've had and to be among the 1% of woman-owned advertising agencies in the country. But I still need help too. So I started this podcast with the intent to dive deeper into the things that hold us back from achieving our goals. So thank you for joining me on this journey to GSD. Let's get started. Welcome to the GSD podcast. I am so excited to introduce you to my friend, Gary Frey, a true connector, business strategist, and GSD leader. As the co-host of the Anything But Typical podcast, Gary routinely interviews entrepreneurs to hear their fascinating stories of how they've grown their businesses. He's also the author of the #1 new release, Silence the Imposter, a guide to overcoming imposter syndrome, which I believe is one of the biggest challenges in getting stuff done. Throughout his career, Gary has served as the president of 4 successful companies, including bizjournals.com, where his leadership grew a modest 3-person team into a $100 million enterprise. He successfully turned around 2 companies and has held executive roles in 2 Fortune 500 companies. Currently, Gary is a partner in the regional CPA firm, coaching businesses and driving growth across the Southeast. When he's not working, you can find him tackling his Monday Murph workout, drumming, or spending time with his family. He's been married over 40 years. He's a father of 2 accomplished men and a proud papa to 4 grandchildren. Please join me in welcoming Gary. Welcome, Gary.
Hey, Jenny.
So
it's good to see you.
Thank
you for having me.
So great to see you, because I think the last time when I was on your podcast was before the world ended in COVID.
It was before COVID, before 2 weeks to slow the spread. That's right.
That was crazy.
Crazy.
So the reason I absolutely love your energy, and I really enjoyed getting to know you through the years. And one of the things that I know that you are known for is this imposter syndrome. So I want to know how you define it, because maybe there are people that don't understand what that means. We talk about head trash and those kinds of things. So take it away.
Yeah. Well, I love the origins of that term, and I never even knew what that term was until probably 4 or 5 years ago. But I was suffering from it before these 2 female psychologists coined that term in the late 70s, because I was about 10 years old when I really started noticing how I felt less than everybody else. I look at everybody else and thought, man, if I could just be normal, whatever that is, it is a setting on a dryer, but that's about it. But these 2 female psychologists, they came up with this term, imposter syndrome, and it's not a medical condition, but it is definitely a mental condition, and it's about head trash. But they noticed about these high achieving female clients of theirs, and the things that were in common to all of them, they were high achievers, but they were plagued by these kind of thoughts of, I'm not good enough, I'm in over my head, I just got lucky. If people just knew this or that about me, they would reject me. I got to keep certain things hidden. I really don't know what I'm doing, right? These are the kind of things that we all deal with. I mean, they say that at a minimum, 70% of the population deals with it. I think it's much higher than that, quite frankly. And quite frankly, the vast majority, I would say probably 90% of all the CEOs that I have coached or that I've worked alongside or worked for that drop their guard with me, deal with it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm happy to hear that it's not just a female problem.
Oh, no. And finally, guys I think it's especially high with guys. I don't know that there's more than female or male ratio. I really don't. But guys don't talk about it as much. That's the one thing that I have noticed. But when they finally get to that point of, man, I don't really know what I'm doing, I'm like, hey, welcome to the club. None
Yeah.
of us do.
Yeah. Why do you think that is that they don't talk about it as much?
I think there's temperament that comes into play, but just in my observation, women are more in touch with their feelings and more willing to share in closer things, whereas guys, and it may be an American thing, I don't know, but they have a tougher time and they kind of stuff it. This is how I'm supposed to be. This is the role I got to assume, those kind of things. But in common to both male and female, what I've seen is we all have this picture of what an entrepreneur or a CEO or a leader is.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have this internal picture of all of the stuff, all of the failings, all of the less thans, all of the shortfalls, all of the stuff that we wish we could edit out of our lives. We're keenly aware of those things. And so we have this comparison trap between, and Instagram and the whole social media has only exacerbated it. It
Oh
has
yeah.
made it way worse.
Mm-hmm.
And it's driving it down into the teens and preteens, quite frankly. Whereas, yeah, I mean, I know I had these feelings of just, I was driven to be, they called me Mr. Perfect in junior high, which was a tormenting label. But I was trying so hard as the oldest kid to do everything right,
Mm-hmm.
and that was tormenting. But we didn't have social media. We had kicked the can at night. We had, but there was still comparison going on.
Mm-hmm.
But now social media, we see everybody's carefully curated show reels that Haven Creative is helping create. So but but seriously, we want to put our best foot forward. Branding, all that kind of stuff. You and I have that in common. But there is a point of, yeah, that's as good as it gets many times, right? The best angles, the best
Oh yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
But we are very keenly aware of all these less than angles, and all the messiness of life and the disappointments and the failures and all that kind of stuff. And then that discrepancy just adds to the head trash.
Absolutely. I joke that it's a CCD, not a school class you have to take in Catholicism, but actually creative comparison disease. It's a disease. We creatively compare ourselves to others, and sometimes you just got to get over that hurdle to
Yes.
just get it done. So,
Well, and so here's where I was going to go with point of commonality. But part of my journey early on in my career, I was a designer.
mm-hmm.
My first turnaround was an ad agency that was actually an integrated marketing firm, and there was no term for that at the time. My partner was he was the head of corporate affairs and communications for Cessna Aircraft, and then he started his own agency. So he's a PR guy, right? And I was a designer who had done everything from television to radio to newspaper to magazine to direct mail. And a lot of times you had people that were, there were agencies that were very dedicated to one of those crafts, especially if you were in direct at the time. And there was no real digital. I mean,
Right.
Al Gore hadn't invented the internet yet. So, that's what I was doing. And, think about, I don't know if it's still a big deal now, but it was a big deal back in the 90s and the 80s. And that was Addy Awards and all these creative awards, right?
Yeah.
That's how you got your name out there.
Mm-hmm.
It was part of your own company's branding and positioning. And here's the crazy thing that I saw was in the creative world, we had some of the most talented but most insecure people on the planet, so
Yes.
it was all chasing the awards. Oh, and you get all fluttered about,
Yeah.
hey, I can't wait to go and accept my award or whatever. Like, big freaking deal,
Well, we need that
but
attaboy to make us feel good. Yeah.
we right, and that feeling of validation,
Yep.
but then it lasts for that long,
Oh,
and
yeah.
then it's like, man, do I still have it?
I suck.
That
Yeah.
creative doubt where, yeah, yeah, I felt that way so many times. Like, oh yeah, but look at what you did. Yeah, but I was just lucky.
Oh
I'm
my
in a
God.
dry hole right now. I can't
Totally.
creatively come up with jack squat.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
then you start the doubt, the doubt, and then you have to keep getting to that next. Oh, okay, good. So I achieved this, and yeah, we look at that piece. We did that, or we nailed that television commercial, or whatever. But if you look at Hollywood, they are plagued by this, plagued by
Yes.
it.
Yes. I do know this
It's crazy.
as working in Hollywood for 12 years. I know that.
Yeah, extreme insecurity. Um, and so, yeah, man, I mean, it bugged me forever. And I never thought, oh, I'm going to go write a book on that. I figured I'd write a book called Sleeping with a Rhino. And that was because I caught my partner embezzling after 3.5 years. I caught him twice, which is why I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina,
Oh
and
my
not
God.
Wichita, Kansas, because I didn't want to destroy him. And my name was on the door. And I either destroyed him or I destroyed my reputation if I didn't out him. And I wasn't going to do either one of those things. So, I get it. Our reputations do matter, but I thought that's the book I'm going to write because it has some twists and turns that are pretty crazy. But it was when I was with another really good CEO who's been on the Anything But Typical podcast, like you, and like you before COVID, Tana Green. And I had coached Tana, and she was on the podcast, and she says, Gary, I don't know what I'm doing.
I say that all the time,
And I
Gary.
said, and she had 10,000 employees at the time,
Oh, okay. Well,
10,000 freaking W-2 employees.
that blows
And
my
I
mind.
said, Tana,
Yeah.
I just laughed because she's a really good CEO. And I
Yeah.
said, why would you say that? And she said, I only have a 2-year secretarial degree. That's
Wow.
trash.
Like that's so,
And
yeah, that's
I'm a college
crazy.
dropout myself, right? And
Yeah.
and so I said, oh, Tana, you run circles around pretty much every CEO that I know that has advanced degrees or degrees, and a lot of them actually don't, which is funny, but not publicly traded ones. They have, Ivy League kind of credentials,
Yeah.
most of them. And then it was very shortly thereafter, and I remember the first guy that I brought in as a client to BGW about 5.5 years ago. Similar sort of thing. He has 3 companies that he owns. He only works 10 hours a week in all 3 of those companies, does quite well, loves to play golf. Most CEOs and entrepreneurs that I know are not big golf aficionados, but he loves it. And he told me the same thing. He goes, I don't really know what I'm doing. I said, why would you say that? He said, I don't have any formal education. I just went to high school.
Oh my gosh. Why is that the thing that's in
Ah,
our head? Oh my, yeah.
and I said, do you realize how many people would love to have your position in life where you only work 10 hours a week and you have 3 companies and you have figured it out? He said, no. And I said, the bulk, the vast majority of people would trade places with you in a heartbeat, right?
Yeah.
And that's when I said, I actually need to write this. And so that was the whole impetus for the whole thing. And that's what drives me now.
So tell me then, in your journey, how you've overcome imposter syndrome.
It's been a slow and deliberate and accidental process, and it's usually been because of very deep valleys,
Mm.
really hard things. So in the book, so this is the book, and I actually did this cover on my phone.
I thought that was pretty cool
So
too.
I still like
You have a
designing.
design background. Yep, you got it.
Yeah. But the funny thing is, like, you can do so much with your phone. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just really amazing to me.
Yeah.
Um, but the, you know, for me, I thought, all right, um, I want to get this thing out. I want people to know about it. It's um, it's a plague that hits so many of us, but the only way I can talk about it is to be extremely vulnerable with the things that I've learned along the way. So there are 7 weapons, and each weapon was learned in a crucible time in my life, it seems like. And so weapon number 2, which is the Thrive Wither exercise, and it's a super simple T chart of, and I had to do this on myself when I had to leave my own company at the Morris Frey agency at a whopping 32 years old. And it's not strengths, weaknesses. It's about what makes you come alive, Thrive column, and what makes you wither. Because I thought, okay, my mentor was in New York City, and he split time between New York and Minneapolis, where he had grown and built what became Fallon McGilligan, and then he was the chairman and vice chairman of and chief creative officer for Bozell Worldwide. His name is Ron Anderson, and he was my mentor. And he said, Gary, you need to come to New York. And he was one of the first people that I told when I discovered my partner's embezzlement. He said, you need to come to New York. And in my Thrive column was, I need to be at a place where it's a good place for my family, because they were young at the time. They were 3 and 6, and then 4 and 7 when we finally moved out here. And New York was like not an option.
Mm-hmm.
So since then, what I've found is, and I use this really simple T-chart for pretty much every CEO and their management team that I work with, and we've taken our entire company through it. And we keep looking, when we hire people, we ask them to get really honest about what's in their Thrive and their Wither columns.
Oh.
And we will try to adjust that role as much as possible to what makes them come alive. You can't do that completely, but you can make adjustments, because what I found is people that have strengths but that are in their Wither column because they're just burned out on it, or they became proficient at it because they were told to, you keep practicing that piano. I hate the piano. I'm a drummer. I hated
Excel
playing
spreadsheets.
piano. And it wasn't.
I said,
well, yes, right. And just because you're good at it doesn't mean that you want to do it. Like, I worked with one of the best illustrators, extremely talented illustrator, but he became an accountant because he was told to, and he was actually good with numbers, but it was killing him.
Yeah.
I mean, think about that. Going from an accountant to an amazing illustrator. Both of them are a little bit more introverted in nature, but it's crazy. So how does that silence the imposter? Well, if we are in our flow state, our high flow state, where we're in the zone, think about times where maybe you were a kid and you were just, drawn or whatever, you were just into whatever you were doing, a project, and your mom's calling, Jenny, and you don't hear her because you are in a high flow state. You are in the zone. That's the same thing that happens with imposter syndrome. Where we get into trouble is where we are in these wither zones. And I see it happen all the time with CEOs. They assume responsibilities within that role and think, well, that's what a CEO does, so I just got to buck up and do it. And I say,
yeah.
So why? Why? Says who? The CEO police? No, you don't have to. When you're a solopreneur, you kind of, but you can there are options for outsourcing stuff. Like most entrepreneurs don't like the finances and all of that kind of stuff. Well, you can outsource that.
Here's a BGW plug. That's exactly why I hired BGW. Because
there you go.
Just because I can doesn't mean I should. And I hate
Yeah.
IT. I did this exercise. I did it a little differently, but I love what you're saying here. It's like, what gives me energy and joy? And what should I eliminate
Yes.
or delegate? And absolutely, it was
Yes.
numbers and technology. I mean, just because I can
Yes.
does not mean I should. So I love that you recommend that in the book.
Yeah, that was an early one for me. It didn't punch it in the mouth completely, but it is one of those things. It's usually a combination of a number of them. Gratitude journal,
Yeah.
uh, that one, that's number 5. And what I learned in 2009 when I lost everything, when $30 million worth of us got blown up in our private equity firm. I mean, Jenny, it was about as dark as I've ever seen. I mean, I had 2 kids in college, lost everything. Our CEO gets ousted, find out he's a complete fraud. We
Oh
have
my
lawsuits
God.
flying all over the place. I mean, I was waking up repeatedly, at least twice a week for about 8 weeks with night terrors, and I'd be drenched in sweat. I'd click on my pulse, and it was 140, and at that time my resting heart rate was 39,
Oh my
and
God.
I was overcome with terror and fear, and
Yeah.
these were real fears. I mean, we had it was bad. It was really bad, and it was in the middle of that I had to learn to find something to be grateful for. And it didn't mean that I put my head in the sand. Those realities and those lawsuits and those terrifying investigations and all that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, like we were super clean, but it's terrifying. Um, those are real, and I could not escape them, but I didn't have to keep focused on them. There were still things that I could focus on and be grateful for. And they can coexist. And it's not gratefulness for those things, it's gratefulness despite those things.
Yep.
I still had things to be grateful for. Um, you know, I wish it wasn't in that deep of a crucible that I had to learn one of the most powerful lessons, which is that gratitude journal and 3 entries daily. And I'm grateful for ... followed by a thought or a prayer about that. But that's a super powerful one. And then the first one, like this one's really simple. And it was before that company blew up. It was almost a 1 year, problems, problems that I realized, like, realize you're not alone. When you just talk about it, if
Mm-hmm.
you can confide in somebody that you trust, that your fears and the things that you're going through, they may not be able to do jack squat about it. Nobody could get me out of any of that stuff, but just knowing I wasn't alone, that is a big deal. So yeah, there are 7 weapons in there, but they were all amassed through a very chaotic and crazy journey that I say I planned and God laughed, and
Yeah.
it's not, but if I had my way, the way I had planned it, I would have still been the president of Morris Frey Agency in Wichita, Kansas, and had all my friends that I had hired along the way, and had a pretty simple life in Wichita, Kansas. But that was not how things went. And so, but I've had a far better and far richer and more terrifying, but richer journey than I could have imagined or orchestrated for myself. So there's something
So
about surrender too, and just realizing, you know what, it is what it is. And there's certain things I can change, and there are certain things I can't. Your attitude and your effort. Those are the only 2 things that you can afford and really change. And I about killed myself with effort by trying to be a perfectionist. That'll wear you out.
yep, I do that now. But I feel like since I've known you, to me, your brand is the eternal optimist. And you really do bring a lot of energy to a room and a lot of optimism. I think I would assume you're always like that, but like you said, going through these valleys, you were able to get out of them easier because of that optimism? Or do you think the optimism came later in life for you?
Yeah, so it's very interesting. So Jennifer and I just celebrated our 41st wedding anniversary in
That's
August.
awesome.
And
Congratulations.
my my temperament, yeah, thank you. I mean, that's a testimony to her and her perseverance. But because she didn't know what she was signing up for, neither did I. But
We never
I've
really
likened
know.
that to
Yeah.
we
Sorry.
don't. But I think it's really hard for a spouse, especially if you're the breadwinner. And she stayed home with our children, and so there's a huge vulnerability there. And I've moved her across the country, you know, moved her to the Great White North of Cleveland, Ohio, and like some crazy stuff that we've been through. But it's kind of like I've said, it's like we're going down Pikes Peak. I've got the wheel, but the brakes just went out. She's holding on for dear life. And
Oh,
yeah, that edge is for real, but at least I got the wheel. And as a spouse that is dependent solely on this other person at this point, is like, it's terrifying. But early on, I would say I was extremely melancholy.
oh,
I was a creative. I was a creative, and that's how I defined myself. And I had all this idealism that, quite frankly, had to get beaten out of me. It just
huh.
had to get beaten out of me, and it did in many ways. But whether it be the partner embezzlement or losing everything in '09, and some other things that have happened, um, you have a choice. You either get bitter
Yeah.
or you become grateful. It's a binary choice. Am I going to get bitter? When I came to Charlotte, I thought, okay, this is going to be great, clean start. I deliver a $2 million account, bring my top designer and his fiance. And on the first business day of their honeymoon, my partner, who owed me 30 grand in commission, says, today's your last day. I got everything I need. I'm like, what? I'd been here 6 months. That's it.
Oh, man.
I had poured everything into this place. I delivered British Aerospace like I said I would. We did the entire media plan. All the creative was done. It was all locked and loaded. And my partner says, I got what I need. And I said, you
Damn.
can't do that. We have an employment contract. And he goes, sue me. He knew I had a few $1,000 to my name, and I'd forgiven over $250,000 of my partner in Kansas. I was on freaking fumes.
Hmm.
That one was way harder than forgiving my partner embezzlement, because we were on our freaking back in a city that we didn't know anybody. It
Oh.
was hard. And then our kids get put on the same soccer team. Are you kidding me? I mean, I had to dig deep to forgive him, and I did. And it took me a year and a half to pay off my attorney. And it was like a open and shut case. It was like tiddlywinks. But you better have a war chest if you're going to sue somebody.
So you
And the thing
did.
that I learned was, it was just killing me. It was eating me alive. Anytime I saw a green Bonneville go by, and he lived about not even a mile from us, drove a green Bonneville. Anytime I saw it, man, my heart rate would race, and I just wanted to, rip his throat out. So, these are simple things, but they aren't easy things.
Yeah.
They are not easy. Uh,
So, so what you're saying is you weren't the eternal optimist. You learned it because you
no,
survived all the
no, no,
valleys.
no, no.
No,
Yeah,
that's
I think the valleys have changed me
yeah.
tremendously, and I also I've seen some people that are eternally, or I hope not eternally, but perpetually bitter.
Yeah.
And yeah, they've been through hard things. Like, life is hard, and
Hmm.
for an idealist, that's a hard thing to reckon. Being in advertising, well, this is how it's supposed to be. I worked with the photographer that did all the pizza pulls for Pizza Hut, and he had, pizza kitchen and all that in his studio. And I did a day shoot where we were doing a bunch of food shots, and had to throw it all away because they were using chemical steam and all kinds of stuff to make this look really good, but it was completely inedible. It was not true. So I know, we create these, this is how it's supposed to be, or this is as good as it gets, but that's not necessarily reality all the time.
Absolutely. And you hit it a few times in this conversation, is being vulnerable and being able to share our stories so that others don't feel so alone, and that this isn't some perfect world out there where, oh, these leaders never suffer. That's honestly, Gary, why I started this
Right.
podcast, because I don't want anyone to think that they're alone in their journey. And I've had some really difficult days too. And I couldn't have done it without my
Yes.
community, my mentors, business leaders around me.
Yes.
So on that note, how important was mentorship and community to you during your journey?
Hugely. We hired our first coach, who was also a consultant, in 1991 as a Hail Mary. I didn't have to pay him the first time, but I 50% I paid him every time we brought him in, and he was $10,000 a day.
Oh man.
Plus expenses flying from Richmond, Virginia to Wichita, Kansas, which is not a direct flight, and it wasn't a cheap flight, and he traveled only in first class, and you paid him up front. So that was a huge sacrifice, but I learned at that tender age, and at that time I was, 30. I wasn't even 30. I was 28. I learned the power of having somebody that you actually pay, because you're going to pay attention to, and it was a sacrifice. I mean, it was a tremendous sacrifice. That was a huge amount of money back then. It still is now. But to have somebody outside the jar to help you read the label, and it wasn't that he gave us like, nirvana, but he knew what he was talking about. And so we were like, well, we're paying him. So he gave us conviction and courage, and we had confidence. Like, we just had to hit the gate hard. So that was a big deal. But then also having mentors, Ron Anderson, he passed away a few years ago. But he was a gem of a human being. He also had polio when he was a kid, at about the same age that my dad had it when my dad was 17. And so there was this overcoming sense with him, but he really understood how to hire. Like, I learned a lot about identifying and hiring talent the way he did. He gave me some of his secrets, which was really cool. And then along the way, I know you're very involved with EO, and having peer groups that you can, confidentially drop your guard and share is a huge deal. All of those things are really important. And then, one of the things that took me a long time, as a college dropout, and I never planned on dropping out of college. I was on a full academic scholarship with the Putnam Scholarship at Kansas State, but I was offered a job right after my sophomore year, after I did an internship, for $10,500 a year and no benefits. And I had to do a portfolio review with my advisor, who had worked at Hallmark. She was I loved Carol Weingartner, man. She was really good. And she said, Gary, I've never told anybody this before, but you got to take this job. I can't place graduates at that time. It was the highest unemployment since the Great Depression. And she said, you're working for a really good guy, and the portfolio is strong, and that's all you got in this world. Like, that's all you got is your portfolio as a designer. Well, when I'm in corporate America at Bank of America, I'm the only SVP that I know of that was a college dropout, much less didn't have an MBA. Most of the people that work for me had MBAs. But I couldn't talk about that. Now HR knew that and all that kind of stuff, because it's a very invasive experience when you go work for a publicly traded bank, which was all fine and dandy, but I just always felt less than. I was always with these people, and they were talking about their time at Yale and whatever, and I'm thinking. But finally, I had to come out of the closet on that. Like, you know what? I've done these things, and yeah, I don't have a degree. And what's been funny is so many other people are like, "Oh, I don't either."
Yeah.
That's so funny.
That's my favorite part.
I
I
mean,
feel the
10
same.
agreed.
Yeah. So I went to Arizona State, and I went to a couple of colleges, but I graduated from Arizona State, and I was a theater major, and I used to be terrified to tell people that because I was a little embarrassed, and now I'm like, nah, screw that. I was a theater major. It really helped me with public
Well, good for
speaking,
you.
telling stories, connecting all the dots. It was totally applicable. And then
Yeah.
having 20 years of marketing and writing experience, it outpaced what I did at college anyway. So yeah, no, I'm with you on
Heck
that. I think
yeah.
it's so funny when we do actually talk about things, how we realize we're not that different from each other. It's hilarious.
Yeah. Yeah. The pretension is a bunch of BS anyway. I mean,
Totally.
we don't connect with people that are full of pretense anyway. You don't
Yes,
really want to spend time with them.
absolutely. And you're right. You said so many good C words like conviction and courage and confidence. And we love C words because it's like communication, make connections to
Yes.
build community. If we don't communicate, we can't do any of that. So I love, well, of
Yeah.
course, that's why you're on the show because I love how you think.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask you this question. This is going to be for my husband because he asked me the other day, and I said, "Ooh, this is a good question for Gary. How do you stay consistent? Because trying to
Mm.
overcome imposter syndrome, I imagine, and anything that we do, hard things. In fact, I kind of messed up your intro with your workout on your
Oh, that's okay.
Mondays. You
No,
can
you're
tell me
fine.
about that because I think that you are someone I admire from consistency's sake. Like you are very consistent in what you do and how you work out and where you show up. Can you tell me a little bit about how you stay consistent?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it comes back to my why. And yeah, I was trained, you can't be a competitive swimmer without consistently getting your butt in the pool when you don't feel like it.
Mm-hmm.
You don't feel like doing 2 days. You don't feel like being in that pool 6 days a week. All of that. Um, but it drove consistency, you know. And what I've also seen is because I have felt like I was a bit of an underdog in most of my things, I felt like I had to outwork everybody else. So that's another one of those imposter syndrome traits,
Oh.
by the way. You got to outwork everybody else just to keep up. But that's how I felt. But then it still kind of comes back to your why. And I knew, especially when I went to college, is like, hey, wait a minute. I'm a steward of this body, and nobody's gonna, like, I could eat whatever I wanted to. I could do whatever I wanted to. I could put whatever I wanted to in my body. But who's going to pay the price? I was going to pay the price.
Mm-hmm.
And so I also know, so I didn't have some consistency at Bank of America. And I had this lieutenant of mine who, she ran one of my big groups. And she said, hey, when's the last time you went running? And I said, I don't know, a couple of days ago. Why? And she said, And I said, what do you mean by that? And she said, you're a little cranky. And I said, really? And she goes, yeah, it shows. When you don't do it, it shows. I said,
Wow.
wow, okay. And I was working 70-hour weeks there. I mean, we went through the three largest bank acquisitions in history at that time. And that's what I was brought in for initially. And so the work was always going to be burying you. And my boss would routinely say, Gary, go home. And my wife at one point said, buy a cot and just move there. Like
Oh.
that wasn't good, right?
Mm-mm.
So this lieutenant said, we're gonna do a deal where 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we're gonna have on your calendar. I'm taking over your calendar, and we're gonna say meet with Jim. And what that means is get your butt to the gym, the GYM. But the meet with JIM means go to the gym, to the Overstreet, mall, and get to the Y, and then I'd go run. And that was one of those times where you felt like the machine was pulling you and like sucking the life out of you, and it was. but I felt like that's what I had to do. I felt like I had to overcome the fact that I didn't have a college degree, and I was managing all these people, and they all had college degrees, and a lot of them were masters. I felt like I had to do it, but she's like, we can tell. So that was like another one of those pivotal moments in kind of 97, probably. Like, okay, because I would still run at night, or I'd run on the weekends and stuff like that. But taking kids to school early in the morning, and then being there for their soccer practices in the evening, and then working till the wee hours past midnight every night, and then get back up and start again. You sacrifice something, and I was sacrificing the discipline of that. So it's not like I've been, I've had moments in my life where I couldn't do it, but it's such an important thing. And at 62, I'm glad I was disciplined in that. And now, like, yeah, you brought up Murph. The Murph, I do that every Monday. So they do it every year to honor a guy that was killed in Afghanistan. And you put on a 20-pound vest, and you run a mile, you do 100 pull-ups, you do 200 push-ups, you do 300 squats, and then you do another mile with that 20-pound vest on for time. And so it's the hardest workout I have every week. But I've been doing it for a few years every Monday, just because it's a celebration. I mean, I hate it when I'm in the middle of it. I mean, I really don't enjoy it. But when I'm done, it's like, boom.
Yeah, you can do anything.
It's a great way.
Right.
You start a Monday off that way, man. That's a great way to kick a week off. So eat the frog.
I just told my husband that the other day, because I hate getting up early, but I get up early to cycle, and I don't negotiate with myself, because as soon as the negotiation starts in my head, I'm not going to do it. So I just have to get out of bed and get on the devil's cycle and just crank it out. And then the rest of my day is cake. It's like, all right, I did it. So it sounds like similar for you. And it sounds like, just like anyone, it's okay. We're trying to be perfectionists and hit it every single day. And it's okay if we're maybe not consistent in our plan, but to at least carve out time in our schedules like you did. That time blocking, I think, is crucial. I do the same. If I don't take that time for myself, I lose it. I end up giving it to everyone else, and I'm not a better leader for it, or a mother, or a wife, because I'm burnt out and I'm exhausted, or I'm hungry, I'm irritable, whatever. And so I love that you said that. Yeah.
Put your mask on. Time blocking first is a big deal. And my calendar is a complete, like, I have different assistants. Everybody in our companies can see my calendar, and I'm like, do not schedule anything on Murph Monday. It's at 9 a.m.
Yep.
And I get up early and I do stuff before then, but that's when I'm doing it. I love that. Schedule stuff.
Well, Gary,
they don't.
Right. That's good, because you set a boundary. I think back to your imposter syndrome. If we're afraid to hold that space for ourselves. Oh, I don't know. Should I? Yes. It's okay. Is that okay? It's like, no, being confident that you need to set that time aside and that no one can touch it. Setting those boundaries, super important. I love that you said that too.
Yeah, it's a big deal, because if you don't do it, the tyranny of the urgent will take over your schedule.
Absolutely.
And the tyranny of the urgent is rarely the important.
Well, sir, we are coming up on time. So I have one last, my favorite question, I think. Everyone has a hype song, and I imagine you have one to get through those Murph Mondays. So everyone has a hype song. What is your hype song?
Yeah, and I do. I have a playlist with a bunch of 70s stuff on it, but I guarantee you nobody has asked for this one or mentioned it, but it's the song is called Warrior. Okay. By Matthew Ward. W-A-R-D, Matthew Ward, and he has one of the most unique voices. But you got to search. But I've even found it on TikTok. So you can find Warrior by Matthew Ward.
Well,
that's my song.
Very cool. We will find it and we'll add it to our Spotify playlist, because that's exactly what.
There you go.
Help people get shit done. Thank you so much, Gary. This has been super fun. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, Jenny. Thank you. This was fun.
Thanks for listening to GSD with Jenny. If you found this episode helpful, share it with a friend. For more ways to GSD, you can also find me on LinkedIn at Jenny Buchholz, where you can sign up for my Maven Mindset newsletter, or follow me on Instagram at Maven Jenny. Until next time, go GSD, Mavens!